A special thanks to Noah for sponsoring this podcast episode. Use code BAGEL for a 7-day free trial, plus 37% off the annual subscription fee, and start listening to business articles from the world's leading publishers today.
So what would you think if we pitched them an idea for like a finance show? We're like, oh, hell yeah.
That's usually one of the biggest hurdles people have is a fear to look at how much they've spent.
I will beat the budget drum until I'm blue in the face. I will die on that hill because that is where the power is found.
Even when folks do start to have some kind of mainstream or commercial success, their lack of confidence and knowledge when it comes to finance ends up still being their undoing.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Plain Podcast, the Plain Bagel Podcast, where I try to talk to people from all different spheres of financial planning, investment management, and really all things finance to try and garner some insights and some lessons about finance and the topic at a higher level. Today, we are blessed with the presence of a pretty big channel from YouTube, the hosts of 2 Cents. This is Philip Olson and Julia Lorenz-Olson, who I'm sure you've seen on YouTube before because really they're one of the bigger faces in that space. Their channel covers really anything finance related, from mortgages and credit cards to subjects like investing and what are stocks and things like that. And we've actually also, we collaborated once before, which is my kind of small claim to fame on, on 2 Cents, my little cameo there. But I wanted to have them on and kind of extend the invitation because outside of YouTube, outside of the great content they put up, they also work as financial planners for their own financial planning company. So Philip and Julia, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah.
I know we had some difficulty getting this going with in Texas. You guys, it was an ice storm, was it that caused some issues?
Yes.
Ice. There was no actual ice, but school was canceled.
No, there was ice last time. The first time we had to cancel on you, there was a legit amount, a lot of ice. And then the next time our kid was sick, and then today they also canceled school for ice, but there is no ice to be seen. So
I see. And you guys made it out anyway, so I appreciate that, the tenacity. So before hopping into kind of higher level personal finance topics, I guess we'll just start with, a bit about you guys and the channel that you have and the work that you do. So could you maybe explain a bit about what got you guys from, because if I understand correctly too, you guys actually have theatrical backgrounds, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm curious, what was the path from theater to financial planning?
a wayward one. Do you want me to handle this one? He's worried I'm going to take like 20 minutes to do it.
my
fine.
version's
Take the time
shorter.
you need.
Her version has more flavor.
All right, go ahead. We'll do a shorter one today.
So, okay, the brief version is we met in college for theater. We both have theater degrees and pursued acting and directing for a little while. We were struggling, starving artists for years and eventually kind of dipped our toes into entrepreneurship and, a better understanding of finance kind of started to blossom with that. Julia had a couple of side businesses, reselling vintage clothing and personal organizing. I was a theater teacher for children for some time. And in the background of all of this, I was kind of cultivating just kind of a hobby interest in personal finance. Reading some of the introductory, books that we tend to when we're dipping our toe into this sort of thing. And I got more and more interested in it, started getting involved in my investments, involved in a budget, involved in, kind of thinking more about the future of our financial lives. And then I kind of decided to do a career change and ended up, getting sort of burnt out as a theater teacher, got an offer to intern as basically an insurance agent and a securities broker, and said, this seems like a wild ride. Let's give it a try. So I transitioned. And very shortly after, Julia actually got her licenses to become a mortgage lender and became a mortgage loan officer.
Like you do.
Within basically a year of we both made this transition into
right at the same time.
The financial world at the same time. We were both on our separate career paths, kind of in a kind of corporate financial setting for something like 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. learning, the industry from the inside. And then we decided to launch our own firm in 2015 to focus and cater to the creatives and artists that we, have spent our whole lives around and are ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So then how did that lead to having a PBS produced YouTube channel about personal finance? What was kind of that connection between those two?
Yeah, so that came from our theater days. So when we launched our firm, I knew we wanted to do video as a part of our, marketing process, because we're both really comfortable on camera. And I just kind of had this vision for making kind of funny, catchy videos so people could see us, like get a sense of what our personalities are like and know how we speak about finance, that we're trying to be really approachable. And, we can kind of laugh about this stuff. It's not all super high stakes and spreadsheets and like, it's okay. And so we started self-producing just these little videos that we would write, and they got kind of more and more involved. And, Philip learned some animation, things like that. But we would just post them on our Facebook page for the business. That's really the only place they lived. We didn't have anywhere else to put them. And a friend of mine who had directed me in a production of Hamlet years ago, he saw these and just on my timeline and reached out and said, "Hey, I saw these videos you guys are making. I think they're pretty good. I'm currently working as a lead animator on a PBS DS show." So PBS has a digital wing of their show. Mm-hmm. And he says, "I know they're always looking for kind of like new show ideas. So what would you think if we pitched them an idea for like a finance show?" We're like, "Oh, hell yeah. Like, how do we, like, what a great place." Like, we're both PBS kids, like dyed in the wool. Like, that's what we grew up on. And so
sure, yeah, of course,
getting to take part in that brand was like, oh my gosh, what a dream. And so that's what we did. We came together with our co-producers and creators. They're another married couple, Katie and Andrew. And together we came up with an idea for the show. We made a pilot. We pitched it to PBS, and then they said, "Yeah, we'd like to do this." And then like a year and a half after that, this is like right as our brand new baby firm is launching, a year and a half after that, we or almost 2 years, finally our first episode launched. So
wow,
yeah,
no kidding,
it takes a while.
Was it like just building up content, or like what was kind of the
PBS
just bureaucracy?
has a legal team that takes a long time, and like we went back and forth on should they produce the pilot. Like basically if they funded the pilot, they would have had claim over this show for like 18 months. Like we couldn't shop it around anywhere, and we really believed in the show, so we were like, we don't want to do that. So we decided to fund the pilot ourselves so that we could retain ownership of it, essentially.
Right, which I'm sure you're thanking yourselves now for doing that, because you've seen the success on the channel.
I guess so. I mean, I love PBS, and I hope I hope our relationship with them is strong. But it was just a lot, and
sure, of course,
there's like a piece of advice on there that I say a lot is like projects like this, businesses like this, always takes twice as long and costs twice as much as you think it's going to be. That's just like the rule, and it proved true here.
Yeah, and I find, I mean, it comes with obviously having a professional production team, but the thing I like about your videos is that, compared to YouTube videos, including mine, where it's sometimes just a guy in front of a desk or something, there's a lot of like, animation, and, I like that kind of side of it, because I think a lot of people, people learn differently, and some people learn by listening to a guy talking for an hour, and other people learn by seeing visual representations, and I think that's really helpful for a lot of financial topics. Now you kind of touched on it, but your company with financial planning, you mentioned it caters to what you call the creative types. I guess I'd be curious to jump into that a bit, because I think you mentioned it yourselves as being I guess starving and aspiring actors, I suppose. it's a tough industry, art. And so I imagine there are some kind of unique challenges that come with financial planning in that space. And I was just curious if you could talk to that a little bit. Like why, I mean, obviously you guys kind of lived it yourselves, but what inspired you to focus on that area?
So we've kind of always identified as outsiders in the financial world. We didn't go to college for it. We spent, our youth and 20s believing that we will never be able to finance. This is not a skill we will have.
Right.
People like us don't do things like that.
Right.
And then we learned that a lot of that is a myth, and a lot of that is just sort of self-fulfilling prophecy that you're I think people in lots of different communities, including the creative community, are taught to believe and maybe almost even embraced as an identity that you're more pure if you don't sell out to the man, or basically if you don't have any money. And so we really have taken that experience we had and integrated that into everything we've really done in this space. So as you mentioned, 2 Cents is bright, it's colorful, it's playful and light, to be more accessible to people who don't feel they can get into this world of finance that's so jargon heavy and can be intimidating with who's in it.
We need visuals. We need visuals. We need metaphors. We need stories.
2 Cents is like the gateway drug for someone who's not
finance,
kind of flirting with this idea of maybe I can do finance. And like just like me, once upon a time, you need baby steps, and you need kind of to build your confidence over time, and that's what 2 Cents is really designed. We were told early on by a fan that they found it to be Sesame Street for adults, and I was like,
I love that.
Sure,
that's a great description.
Yeah, I'm like, great.
It's not highly advanced. It's not highly technical. It never gets very in depth. That's what channels like yours are for. That's what lots of other thought leaders are for. But this is fits that specific niche. And so with our firm, same type of thing. We're like, we can cater to anyone we want to. Who would it be, and who's really kind of being ignored right now? And what it's ended up being over the last 5 or 6 years is, I would say a lot of especially creative entrepreneurs, artists, musicians, podcasters,
UX designers,
and honestly, heavily skewing female, because the same sort of issue, this is, I think the financial world is can be intimidating and not feel accepting to a lot of women. And so the fact that we're trying to make this a little bit more outsider friendly, and hold folks' hands, explain things in depth, come with the heart of a teacher, caters to that. A lot of times in the creative world, even when folks do start to have some kind of mainstream or commercial success, their lack of confidence and knowledge when it comes to finance ends up still being their undoing, because they don't know how to manage it, or make wise decisions, or chasing every single shiny object. So we're trying to help a few more of them harness that success.
Yeah. And I think in normal places, when you come, at least, what I've heard from our clients who have tried to find help in other spaces is whenever they come with irregular income, lots of people are trying, they might have a 9-to-5, but they also have a side gig. They've got lots of things in the pot, right? Lots of plates that they're trying to spin to kind of get their creative energy out, which creates a not perfect 9-to-5 income. And for some reason, a lot of planners are just ugh, I don't know how to deal with that. And so we're like, oh, that's fine. It doesn't mean you can't plan. It just means you have to approach it in slightly different ways. So that's a big piece that I see a lot in this. And then also just the lack of confidence, because, kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy is most people who feel a little on the artsy fartsy side, for some reason, we're just told that that means you're bad with money, or if math was a struggle, like it was for me, math did not come naturally to me at all. I thought that was what kept me from being good at that. And my hope is just to be no. That's what calculators are for. Like, you don't have to do anything in your head. Like,
Right.
Really, finances is a mental game and learning about yourself. So that's what we hit on.
I think too, and I think it's great because I think when it comes to finances, obviously, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, but obviously everyone should have some base level understanding of finance. So it's pretty self-defeating to assume that you should not learn about the space because, of the advantage you really do get even just by knowing kind of the basics and a lot of that stuff. It's an overused example, but it's true. Like when it comes to things like compounding and stuff like that, like a lot of it is just, the earlier you know about it and the sooner you employ it, the better you are after the fact. So I think obviously it makes a lot of sense. And you touched on it a little bit, but and maybe this is part of the perception of why people might like avoid the area as financial planners. Do you find you have unique challenges catering to that space because you have those irregular incomes? Like I imagine from a financial planning standpoint, that does throw a wrench in the road for some aspects. Do you have kind of unique challenges you think are, I guess, unique to that clientele, or do you find overall like it's blown out of proportion, I guess?
My sense is there's one really large or primary challenge that can throw a wrench in the works when it comes to being a creative or having a bunch of side gigs or an entrepreneur or whatever. The irregular income doesn't fit neatly into the box of kind of the budgeting and financial planning models that ask you the question, how much do you make per year? Or what will you what can you spend next month that's coming in? We've both lived the reality of a 50 to 75% swing in our income every month. And we would sit down with the kind of classic budgeting tools, a spreadsheet or a paper form or whatever. And every month, there's the prompt at the very top. What's coming in this month? It's like, I think this, and it never is. And it's so incredible.
Frustrating.
So we had to kind of, try to fit that square peg into the round hole for some time until we figured out you basically just need a relatively simple to understand paradigm shift of how to deal with an irregular income person when it comes to projecting income or monthly budget. And then it all kind of falls into place. I would say just to boil it down to its most bare component, because you can't predict next month's income with an irregular income, we just say, stop doing that. And what we teach folks to do instead, and we kind of do this through a process, is to actually work in the mindset of what actually came in last month, and that's what we budget with as a finite number. So it's kind of sort of a mental paradigm shift, living on last month's income, which is always a known amount, as opposed to having to predict. It does require you to essentially make 1 month of income disappear because you're always expecting that next paycheck. So you have to take that hit, and it tends to be a little stressful the first time you do it. But once you do, we made this shift like maybe 7 or 8 years ago now, to where every month that we sit down to budget, we don't ever ask what's coming in next month. We ask what came in last month. what literally came in that we didn't spend, which is now the entire month's worth of income, and that's what we budget with. And it's a different amount, but it's a known amount. And it's just it seems so simple, but it's like not intuitive. It wasn't to me. And it's like a game changer when you can just make that tiny shift.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, you raise a good point, because I've personally seen that a lot. Like, and, you apply for a credit card, you do virtually anything, and they're going to ask you what your annual salary is. Well, if it depends, that obviously makes things a lot tougher. And I'm a very technical guy. I'm a fan of spreadsheets. I could see that being a challenge and for a lot of people when it comes to things like budgeting and stuff. But that makes a lot of sense. With and it's kind of funny because I think now you guys are still kind of living that. Like now you have YouTube, which obviously is YouTube, and that's also volatile. And you run your own business, which obviously comes with its own challenges. But I think it makes a lot of sense. A lot of these people, you would assume, because their situation doesn't fit nicely into these models, maybe they're just not meant for finance, if you will. But obviously it sounds like you can figure this stuff out if you think of a proper plan for it. And within the investment management space, I think there's always been this talk of like a shifting structure in the sense of, more do it yourself and more things like robo advisors and more things like base level ETFs, like challenges in that investment management space. I was curious when it comes to financial planning, maybe this requires you guys to explain the difference between like a financial planner and like an investment manager like myself. Do you see kind of any shifting things like that? Do you think that people are becoming more educated, maybe more self-sufficient, or do you think people are still looking to rely on financial planners to do that sort of work? Because I think that's kind of the main argument is some people see the investment manager as being like a dying breed. Do you see kind of similar forces at play when it comes to financial planners, or what are the differences there?
There's so many paths I could take on this one. I would say my sense from my tiny little point of view is that the financial planner is in absolutely no danger as a species. The kind of case example or I will point to as to why I think that is when Betterment, the largest robo advisor, hit the market, their business model, their value proposition was, you don't need a financial planner or a financial advisor or an investment manager. You need a smart algorithm, and that's us, and we're really cheap, and we'll kind of, we can replace all those folks. Right. And there was, at least in the financial planning world, a bit of trepidation that like, oh gosh, the robots are coming for our jobs.
They took our jobs.
2 years ago, Betterment, which is still the largest robo advisor and a very, significant asset manager for how young they are, announced that their number one priority as a firm right now, what they are putting the most money behind, is growing their Betterment for Advisors platform, which is basically a robo advisor with a human being attached to it that you pay the human being for planning. And I interpret that as algorithms are awesome. Human beings need another human lots of the time. I think there is a deep, deep need to have someone explain something, have empathy, to be able to, communicate in stories and understand their family and all these things that our algorithm really cannot do.
And keep you from making very expensive mistakes, right?
And I think it's fascinating that if anybody on earth should be against this, it should be Betterment, but they're the biggest advocates for this has to happen. So I don't.
We use them.
Right. Yeah. So I don't think the Terminator's coming for at least for financial planners' jobs.
That's good.
I think it's going to be more of a partnership, because I think the robo advisors and these smart algorithms, and I'm a large proponent myself of efficient markets and low cost index ETFs and all these things that are sort of part of the new wave, but it's not it's really not an either or in my opinion.
Hey guys, just a quick pause to once again thank our sponsor Noah, who offers a really awesome service, and if you are liking this podcast, you might really like what they have to offer. Noah is an app that professionally narrates and curates playlists of business articles from the likes of Bloomberg, The Economist, and Harvard Business Review. Not only letting you listen to thought-provoking pieces, but linking articles together on related subjects so that you get well-rounded coverage and multiple perspectives. In fact, they actually have a team of industry experts behind the service, and it really does show in the quality of their picks. So if you'd like to try them out, you can visit the link in the description or use coupon code BAGEL to get a 7-day free trial, plus 37% off the annual subscription fee. Thanks again, Noah, and now back to the episode. In your job, kind of to dive into that topic a bit more, do you find like you run, like, I guess I would say, what are the common either roadblocks, whether it be emotional or psychological or whatever, that you see people experiencing when it comes to trying to get on top of their finances? Like, what are the, I guess, psychological things you see a lot as being financial planners?
Skill set and education. Skills and education. So budgeting, the lack of the skill of budgeting is everywhere. Like, hardly anyone comes to me with a very good established skill of being able to aim their money consistently. That, and without that, like how, it becomes very difficult to build on that. So that skill is missing 9 times out of 10. And then the other piece that's missing is I think education, the lack of education. I don't know how it is in Canada, but in the US,
it's still pretty bare.
There's
like,
nothing. There's no, I didn't get a single personal finance class. Nothing. I got like macroeconomics, but like great use that gave me when I'm thinking of like, should I, like, how do I budget, or how do I think about loans, or, so it's just, it's gutted. So people are coming to me with just a hodgepodge of like this article and that conversation they had with their uncle who's like 30 years in the past, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
It's, so those two things I think are like the Achilles heel of most people's ability to really interact with their money in a healthy way. And so we try what we can to shore those things out.
Yeah, we integrate this concept into sort of, I would say, kind of two different stratas, I guess, which is, so Julia's an accredited financial counselor, which is going to be, focused on budgeting, debt management, credit score repair, that type of stuff. I would say kind of like the foundational layer. And then when it comes to like the more, growth and future oriented stuff, investments, compound interest, retirement, all the kind of like
estate planning,
that kind of stuff. The lack of education, the way that manifests for me as a certified financial planner is, I find one of the biggest roadblocks that I basically try to help detangle basically every day of my working life is trying to separate the noise of what people are hearing in the world and the news and their uncle and their neighbor from like, so what do I do about that? Like, people have no ability to navigate those two things and translate, like, what if this is even relevant? That ad for gold I saw, or Ukraine, or inflation, like, what if this even matters to me? And the rare things of those that you should be reacting to, how do you even react? I don't know if I can name one client of mine that has a good instinct on that, at least when we began, because I think a lot of it comes with not just the knowledge, but also experience and education, which if you never have done this before, you don't have any.
Right. And that puts that lack of confidence also puts you, I think, in a continuously reactive mind frame. You're just reacting to the stimulus that is being thrown at you day in and day out. And some people are like, especially when they're trying to learn, they're just inundating themselves with stimulus.
Yeah.
So much so there's like, oh God, what do I react to? Whereas I try and really help coach people on a proactive mindset. Your values and your goals should take precedence. It doesn't matter what you read. It doesn't matter what your uncle said. What do you want? If the clearer you can be on that, the easier everything else becomes. Then it's just a question of working backwards, right? From that. So it can be, that shift is hard.
Yeah. And I think, like, to speak on both of them, I mean, obviously, if one thing I always say, because I focus on investments on my channel, investments in economics, but because that's my wheelhouse, one thing I find I'm always repeating is, you don't want to put the cart before the horse. Like, you do have to budget before you start chasing cryptocurrencies or whatever it is. Like, you need to figure out your budgeting, and obviously, investing is great, but if you can't keep up on your credit card payments, then it doesn't do a whole lot to help you in the long term. But I've seen a lot of what you were talking to, Philip, at my work too, is a lot of clients. Like, sometimes you just have a client and they'll set up a meeting and all they want to do is talk about the daily happenings of what's going on in the markets. And because there's all that noise, and you're right, it's difficult to navigate that if you've never done it, if you've never managed investments or have that familiarity with finance. And there's one criticism I've always had of YouTube is there's a lot of noise on there when it comes to invest, like,
Well,
the
you
rise
gotta
of
make
Bitcoin.
the content, man. You gotta fill the air
that's how you get the
with
views.
something. It's like,
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So there's this terrible combo of like there's bad advice, and then there's like,
and there's such a want of advice. There's such a lack of any sort of education on this. So people are hungry, right? They're hungry.
So like there's the just totally off the deep end stuff, but I don't think that's most of it. There's I would say plenty of like appropriate advice in the correct situation,
right?
Which people just the lay person does not understand. You can't parse, like, is this speaking to me, this guy who's telling me that all you should ever invest in is real estate? Like, is that for me, or this crypto thing, or this NFT thing? And like, I would say every week or so I have a call with somebody who's just soaked in a ton of this. Like, you can just like the Reddit and the Twitter.
You just got to do a big old cleanse on them.
After like 3 sentences and I'm like, talking. I'm like, I know
your anxiety is like wafting onto me, and like, we need to take a few deep breaths and let all that go, because almost none of that pertains to where you are right now.
And even on top of that, I think just time has shown that when it comes to like any example, like whether it be the latest and greatest investment or the worst investment, like people thinking that stock markets are going to crash or whatever it be, like it's been shown that long-term focus tends to outweigh that. Like if you have time on your side and you have a strategy you can stick to that isn't you said reactive. I think that's a great way to put it. Like, reaction isn't necessarily a great investing strategy or financial strategy for that.
And like, money, it's very easy to feel very out of control because there are lots of things out there that are outside of your control. What the market's going to do, you don't know. And like, you can't control, right? So so people are trying to maintain a semblance of control by trying to react all the time. It's like, oh, well, if I just take this information and move on it, then that means I've retained some sense of control through that. And it's very, very difficult to convince people out of that. To be like, actually.
Well, I think this, relates, I think, to what you focus on your channel and kind of the flavor you bring too, which is like, so often the right advice or the advice that time, science, research shows is the best advice is just really boring. Or very simple.
Sure, yeah.
And like that is a challenge. You asked about challenges. Like I recently tried to look up this study again and I couldn't find it, but it is a study, and I have actually read it that is, and the gist of it is they tracked families for their kind of wealth accumulation over 30 years, looking at what the driving factors were between how much they saved, asset allocation, fees, market timing, specific investment selections and so forth. And something like 76% of it was just like how much they saved. The next like 10, 11% was asset allocation. And so between like, did you actually save anything at all? And did you have a basic breakdown of stock, bonds, cash? Is like, you're almost at an A on the test, is so boring. Like that's so lame. It's like, save. I know this is kind of crazy, but like, did you actually save anything?
You can't save your way to the moon, Philip. That's the that's the reason. But no, I think I might have read that.
It came out, I want to say,
or
like
some variant
09, 010, something like that. So like when folks will come and say, so often there's this hyper focus on the remaining, 5 to 10% of like, should I be in this target date fund or that target date fund? Or I'm thinking about swapping from this, this index to that index. I'm like, okay, hold on. We've totally missed like what the fact that you're only saving 2% into this is actually much more important.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, I mean, like you think of it, like saving money is a 100% return on like the money
when
you
say
didn't
it
have.
Like that.
But that's why we come back to budgeting so much, right? Because that's where the savings battle is won and lost.
Yeah, of course.
Right there. if you can't create a meaningful and consistent gap between what you save and what you spend, and like you can't intuit your way into that. Like our ability to mentally account for this is crap. We're not built to do that. So that's why I'm like, I will beat the budget drum until I'm blue in the face. I will die on that hill because that is where the power is found to get to invest, to get to build your wealth in any sort of consistent way, right?
I think too, even when you focus on the investment side, there have been studies that show that between security selection, so the actual like, picking the Teslas or whatever hot stocks and stuff like that, versus just general asset allocation, which is just the idea of having, I don't know, just to throw out a number, like a certain percentage of your wealth in stocks versus whatever, that the asset allocation tends to play a bigger role in how you do. So, I think a lot of people, they take the extreme, well, at least, no, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but a lot of beginners, I guess I would say, you think of investing and you think, oh, like it's about, especially the last few years, it's about finding the right big idea that will blow up and make me all this money. And then I don't have to save because I made $1 million on Neopet NFTs or whatever it is. But I think like you said, I like saying that good investing is boring because it really is. There's nothing overly exciting about it. When it comes to the job, I mean, I guess this is more of a current question, but do you have any kind of issues that you're seeing clients bring up, like on this topic? Like, what are kind of the top of mind concerns people are coming forward in a reactionary way currently, I guess? Is it just whatever you see in the headlines, or is it something more persistent?
I mean, inflation has been a big one, obviously, with understandable,
of course,
reasons. So, that's a thing.
Like a more persistent one, I would say. So I started in the industry in 2010, and so I've been doing this for 12 years, and every single year I'm consistently bombarded with questions about, should I really be investing now? Because it seems like it's about to take a dive.
It's always about to take a dive.
Every single year for 12 years, where we have been shattering all-time highs. Almost every single one of those years, it's like it's right about, the axe is right about to drop, right, Philip? And it is a conversation I'm frankly sort of tired of having about like,
fair,
I don't know, and neither do you. So why are you trying to figure this out? And we're terrible at trying to predict when the next big one's going to come. But there's just this like, the sense of we're right about to have a catastrophe has been constant for 12 years.
I think because we serve the age of people that we serve, we're mostly dealing with people between in their late 20s up to late 40s. Like that's really kind of the vast majority of people we're dealing with are right between there. And 2008 was traumatic. It was. It created a financial trauma for people who were just getting out of college. I graduated in 2008, right? And I was actually just reading this book. I think it's Morgan Housel, like Psychology of Money, that shows.
I've heard of that, yeah.
When you are just entering the workforce, the reality of that economy is deeply imprinted in your mind. And how you approach your finances is greatly shaped just by that. And I think we're seeing that is like, people are scared. They saw their families. They saw people, their parents losing jobs, their grandparents losing savings, and that's what's in their mind, and they're worried about that. That's deep and it's real. And I think just dismissing it as silly completely negates the point. These feelings are real, but how I like to explain it to people is like, whether or not it's coming is not something you can control. And we don't know, but how about we try and set up your finances in a way that isn't dependent on whether it soars or crashes, right? Like there's a way to go about it that like, if the stock market crashes tomorrow, I'm not losing sleep because the stuff I have in there, I don't need for a long time. right?
Right.
So there's
Yeah.
a way to interact with this very scary thing that doesn't mean you're going to be hosed if it goes down.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, because a lot of times people get, obviously, like, with 2008, that's a good point that makes a lot of sense as to why people, for the past 10 years, what was the longest bull run in US history, why people had been waiting for kind of the next big crisis to happen. But I think that's a really good point, that you can prepare yourself so that regardless of whether markets keep going up or keep going down, that you'll be okay. And I think some people get hung up on the idea that when times are good, especially because we've had such a long bull market, that's the time to, okay, well, things have been good for 10 years. Let's dabble in some really high risk, and people kind of lose sight of the risk that they're taking on for these returns. But, you can kind of stem that a little bit so that, sure, you might not be making $1 million on one position. That sucks, I guess. But long term, you'll be okay regardless of whether markets keep going up or crash, because you've set yourself up nicely to do well in either situation.
Right. So you and I and Julia know that because we've experienced this, and we've intellectually learned it, and then we've also experienced it. But if you haven't experienced it, it's sort of a leap of faith. And I really have,
Sure.
I would say two very different conversations every week with folks about investments. The first one is someone who started investing in the last year and says, boy, Philip, I don't think this is working out. I think we should do something different. And then there's all the rest who say, this is great. I'm so glad.
What do I need you for?
This is the gravy train. This is the best, the best.
No, they're usually like, thank you for convincing me.
Okay, well, that's
good. No. It's the opposite. No, it's the opposite. It's the folks who have experienced like a 6% or 5% drop in their equities to say like abort, like we need to do something totally different. I thought this would be going up. I thought line goes up. And then then there's the others who are like, wow, you're so wise, Philip. You're so right. The line does go up in time.
Oh, that's great.
And it's like, oh yeah, well, you've had time.
So we're kind of closing in on, we've been talking for around 50 minutes so far. So I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I guess to try and close things off, what would you have in terms of some tips for people? Let's just take a standard viewer, someone who, let's say, is just starting their finances, maybe just leaving college or whatever it be, entering the workforce. What would be some tips you would have in terms of setting yourself up nice financially? Obviously, getting a good job is great advice, but in terms of, I guess, what you can do regardless of where you end up working, what would be some tips you could share?
Oh, well, there's no easy path. I think we're going to have different,
there's like 60 things we could say here, so we'll pick one or two.
Sure,
we have so many, but obviously for me, it's going to be budgeting, because that's like driving school. You need to learn how to drive your money. If you don't know how to drive your money, it doesn't matter if you're making 50 grand or 500 grand. And I've worked with people all in between. And believe it or not, you can make a lot of money and still be mega stressed out because you don't have the skill of aligning it with your values. And so it takes a little while. Like, if you really focus on just teaching yourself how to budget, or hiring a coach to teach you, there are some of us out there, assume it's going to take like 5 to 6 months. And then you will have a skill set for the rest of your life, and know that it's not going to be easy. It's going to be kind of hard and stressful, and it's going to tell you things you don't like.
At first.
Just like when you learn how to drive a car, you're like, oh my God, everybody's out to kill me. I'm going to murder somebody. Like, I'm freaked out. I'm not good at this. Right? You're like, That's exactly how this is. But it's a skill set that if you spend the time to do, will have the most massive impact. Better than any like Tesla stock you might buy. Like, that's where, for me, I'm like, take the time. I know it's boring. I know it kind of sucks. But once you get through that hard piece, it's like, whew, I'm never going to not have it. And it allows you to make the most of no matter what you make.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to dive too deep into it now, but now that we're kind of wrapping things up, but I do find that that's usually one of the biggest hurdles people have is a fear to like look at how much they've spent. It's kind of like a huge thing for budgeting.
Absolutely, because it's a reflection of you. We have a ton of guilt and shame when it comes to this stuff, right? Kind of like, our bodies, like how we're taught, oh, don't look at that. Let's not talk about that, Of course, we have, it's very difficult to look at things fully in the face. But once you're in the light, there's no going back. It's like, oh gosh, okay. But yeah, people have avoidance with this stuff because it's high stakes and it feels very emotionally heavy.
Sure.
For some reason, financial, especially CFPs, but I would just say financial advisors in general, like really kind of sneer at the prospect of helping people budget. It's almost like
they're like, you need to go figure that out and then come back when you.
It's like it's not even worth their time, which is very strange to me. But I mean, I have to say, I agree that like if you had like the personal finance success pie chart, like 60% of it is like, do you have a budget you actually update, review, and make changes to once a month? Like if that is a yes or no, I would really say that's over half of success.
Oh, yeah.
It is, again, so not sexy, not exciting, not going to blow your mind. But the people we see, if I see that checked yes or no with anyone I talk to, it's like, okay, we're going to make it or we're not. Really.
Yeah.
Right. Right, makes sense.
Okay, well, I'll for my part, I'll maybe take a different topic, which I would say, especially someone's first entering the workforce, I would say paying off debt is a fabulous investment. If you're focusing on what to invest in, not only are you getting rid of interest rate, which is nice, and folks tend to focus on that, but further, you're actually freeing up cash flow for years into the future, which you don't know what's coming down the road, but there's going to be some bad things. There's going to be some challenges. There's going to be some surprises. And the more cash flow you can free up makes budgeting easier, makes saving way easier, makes bad things less bad when they happen. Yeah. And it is just not a very attractive thing to do right now among folks, is to get rid of debt, especially low interest debt is just the least sexy thing to pay off because other people's money and I could be investing this instead, blah, blah, blah. I would say if I could give any advice that I knew someone would follow coming out of college, it would be getting rid of debt is an incredible investment. You will be so glad you did down the road.
Yeah.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those tips. I'm sure viewers will find them very helpful. And thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. I know it was a bit of a stretch to get together, but it was well worth it, I think. Guys, thank you for joining us today. You can find Philip and Julia online on 2 Cents, the YouTube channel. I'm sure you guys, if you watch personal finance videos, have seen them at one point or another. Do you guys have any other kind of socials or anything you'd like to shout out?
I have a new podcast that I started.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
My best friend, Lindsay, she's also a financial planner, and we're both professional musicians. So we're sort of comedians at heart. So it's called Your Money Mamas, and it's like funny financial advice, and we write a original piece of music for every episode. So you can find us there on all the things. So there's that. And then our firm is The Art of Finance. That's where we're at for that. And then 2 Cents on YouTube.
Cool. Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate that you took the time to chat.
Our pleasure. It was fun.
Thanks for having us.
Guys, thank you for watching. And we'll see you in the next one. Cheers. A final thanks to Noah for sponsoring this episode, and your final reminder to use code BAGEL for a 7-day free trial and 37% off the annual subscription fee. Thanks for watching.